Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 195th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, each panelist will share with the rest of the panel a thought or idea of a political nature that they would like the others to consider. For instance, government is way too big and wasteful and should be reduced in size. Today's panel includes Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and faculty member of Wadsworth High School. Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, senior research chemist, retired. Joe Gaines, former faculty member of the University of Akron and Wadsworth High School. And I may have some thoughts of my own also, surprisingly. Patty, would you please share a political idea or thought or suggestion that you think the others should consider?
Well, I have a lot of ideas, but the one thing that came first to mind when you posed the question to us was campaign finance reform. I am really concerned about the conditions within this country where, very frankly, if you're not a multi-millionaire or billionaire, it is next to impossible to run for political office, at least on a national level, or even at this point on a state level. We have things such as super PACs that are allowed, which enables a candidate to receive money from an organization that has no accountability whatsoever. As a matter of fact, the public does not even know who those donors are because they do not have to be named. How the money is used many times is not under any type of supervision in any way, shape, or form. For example, our former president has a large super PAC that he is receiving millions of dollars right now. And legally, he can go out and buy a new car with it. He could put it into a hotel. He could use the money to buy groceries because it's not limited as many donations are within a normal type of election. I think there has to be consideration as to who donates money. And I'm not talking just countries or donors that are foreign or from foreign countries. I'm thinking in terms of even in state elections. So much money now is being poured into state elections, whether it be senators, whether it be governors, whether it be attorney generals, and the money's not coming from people in that state. In other words, the stakeholders are not the ones choosing the candidates. The money is many times coming from large, very wealthy business people who have a vested interest in seeing a particular candidate placed into office. And the will of the stakeholders then is taken away because who we may wish, for example, to be governor or to be senator or to be attorney general in the state of Ohio is compromised by the fact that so much money is poured into the election by these outside organizations, which you have to admit, when someone is donating $5 million to your campaign or $1 billion to your campaign, that this is really ripe for corruption with that candidate. When I state that only wealthy people can run for office, if you look at the amount of money that is poured into an election, I know Jim Renacci has loaned his campaign for governor over $4 million. The average Joe cannot do that. And I think we're eliminating some really good candidates because of this. I think there needs to be campaign itself reform in that the length of time by which we campaign for office is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we're 1 year into a presidency and we're already discussing who is running in 4 years. And there are those that are out there doing their best to set themselves up for that election in 4 years. I think it's in England that they're only allowed to campaign for 1 month. And I think that would be great if we didn't have to see this onslaught of election materials. We also need to look at other ways to finance elections, whether it be through the government financing those elections, which is done or can be done and has been thought of in the past, but just so as to keep it on the up and up. It's just too rife a system that presently favors the wealthy only and gives too much power and influence into the wealthy, into certain businesses who are trying to make a point. And we need to get back to elections being sponsored by the people.
Why do you suppose we can't do that? It makes all the sense in the world, what you're saying. And that with a lot of people feeling right now that the very idea of democracy is threatened, it seems to me that the unlimited funds that you're talking about would be one of the things that threatens democracy. Why wouldn't Congress do something about it?
Well, because right now, everybody that's there is wealthy and has allegiance to organizations that are not going to allow them to do that.
They benefit from it.
Right. There are very few that are, like an Elizabeth Warren, who's wealthy in and of herself, that are willing to tackle this topic.
Yeah. Ron, what are your thoughts?
I've got a situation that I've known about for a long time. It's an international situation, but our country, our government has not been very effective in helping deal with that. And that's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In 1953, when I was a freshman in college, I met a young man named Paul Amash. Paul was from Jerusalem. He was Arab, and he was a Christian. He wasn't very comfortable living in Jerusalem. He came to this country to attend college. And over the next 4 years before he graduated, he was able to bring both his parents and two of his older brothers and their families to live in the United States. They got jobs with the college. And I don't know what happened with Paul, if he later obtained citizenship or what. He's dropped out of sight in the alumni world. But so this is my first indication that things weren't going well with the tremendous military might of Israelis in the war in 1948. So that continued. I then in the mid 70s, I became aware of an organization established by the Mennonites called the CPT, the Christian Peacemaker Teams, which has recently just renamed itself as Community Peacemaker Teams. Their slogan is to get between. And there are many places in the world where advocating for individual rights and trying to get between tyrannical governments and people. And they're a very strong presence in Israel and in Palestine. And we met a young woman who is back in this country on a leave and going around churches. She was working in the city of Hebron. And Hebron is a particular hotspot for this. When she went back, she was injured by a bulldozer standing up trying to keep a Palestinian's house from being destroyed. She was not injured seriously, fortunately, but this was going on. And so the Israeli government has been pushing into Palestinian neighborhoods and areas on the West Bank and elsewhere, and bulldozing homes, harassing kids, checkpoints, harassing children on their way to school. Now, Hamas and the PLO have not been blameless in this. Hamas occasionally fires a few rockets and Israel bombs a few houses. But they go in and clear areas and knock down olive trees, which are economically supporting Palestinian families. Some of these trees are hundreds of years old. Olive trees are very long-lived and very useful. So what's going on? Well, and in 1948, in the war, Israel took the West Bank and created a lot of refugees. The Oslo Accords, Israel and PLO, it was not a two-state solution, though. That was 1993 and again in 1995. There are two stages in that. It wasn't a two-state solution, which has been the Palestinian goal, particularly. In 2000, President Carter invited Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat to Camp David, and they had some discussions about that. So there are two factors.
And they reached an agreement too.
They reached an agreement, but again, not too much came of it. Again, it was not a two-state solution. At least Israel did not follow that. Two factions have been in Palestine, and generally we're not quite sure who's in charge: the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or Hamas, which is more of a terrorist organization, it turns out. So recently, however, there's been a development. There's a group of negotiators who have former Israeli and Palestinian peace together. This was in the paper just this week, actually, have drawn up a new proposal for a two-state confederation. A confederation here that would offer a way forward, perhaps, on this. And it's modeled kind of loosely, as I understand it, on the Oslo agreements, but calls for an independent state of Palestine in most of the West Bank, in Gaza, and East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is a particularly hot point of contention here among the groups. So in the 1967 Medius War, that occurred, but Israel and Palestine would have separate governments, but coordinate at a very high level on security, infrastructure, and other issues that affect both populations. I'm reading now, so forgive me for that. The plan will allow nearly 500,000 Jewish settlers in the occupied West Banks to remain there, with large settlements near the border annexed to Israel and a one-to-one land swap there. Settlers living inside the West Bank would be given the option of relocating or become permanent residents in the state of Palestine. The same number of Palestinians, probably refugees, would be allowed to relocate to Israel as citizens of Palestine with permanent residency in Israel. And this was based on the Geneva Accords, actually, in 2003, it says. So obviously lots of problems with that. The present prime minister is Naftali Bennett. He's a former settler, and he's been opposed to two-state settlements. However, in 2003, they have a rotation system in this, and Prime Minister Yair Lapid, who would take over in 2003, he supports an eventual two-state solution. So this group will be submitting their proposal to the United Nations and to the U.S. Through the envoy system, and we don't know what's going to happen there. But our government has not been really supported there, probably politically, because there's a strong Jewish vote and financial support in this country for the state of Israel, as well there should be. But many of the Jewish folks that I know are politically liberal and not too happy with how Palestine is being treated. So that could be going on, and particularly egregious was President Trump moved the embassy from Tel Aviv, the capital of Israel, to Jerusalem, in de facto saying, well, Jerusalem should be an Israeli city. Well, that's not going to fly, and it was a slap in the face to any kind of two-state solution or so on. So we've not been handling that very well, and it's a point of. It's a possible conflagration there that can break out at any time. And I think we're well to be more concerned about it than we are. So,
yeah. Would you agree that that's probably the most complicated issue on the world map today?
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very complicated.
Mideast overall.
You know, this Confederation thing, John, it strikes back to, back in our old Presbyterian church, we were striking up a deal with the Episcopals we had a minister and they had a church, and so our minister was going to take minor orders so he could give community to the Episcopals, and we were going to share Sunday schools and work on working on. I was on, I don't know if you were on, but I was a committee who drove the Constitution for that, and it fell apart for other reasons. But
I was there at the time. I know. Joe, yeah. What are your thoughts?
Well, first off, I agree totally with Patty, and I never thought I'd ever say that, but I agree with what she said. And the issue about Palestine, I think, is 100% true. It's been an issue for many years, and there doesn't seem to be a
1948.
solution to it. Pardon?
Since 1948,
Yeah, yeah, after the
it's a
war.
partition. Yeah.
But one of the problems I see is the president, how we go about selecting the president and what qualities we want in a president. Um, and even when we see negative qualities, we don't seem to care about it. So I want to consider what leadership qualities a political leader must have to make him a good president. What excuse me, what political leader must have to make him a good president? What qualities? He's got to be honest to all voters, not just Democrats, not just Republicans. And I think our party system has grown too difficult. Our party system is, and I'm a Democrat, obviously, and I say that because of I voted that route. Um, Even though there's sometimes Republicans I think are good. I mean, I would like to see a Republican, in this office, that office, and I have no problem with that, as the governor is right now, and other people. But be honest to all voters, not only to their own political party. They realize that they represent all American voters, not just only party members. And the parties, I think, in many cases, have become too strong, and they work for the party. They don't work for the people, and I think that's a major problem. Uh, they must not be a political opportunist, and I see that happening right now. If there's a problem, we solve that. Well, don't even solve it. We work towards it, and we make that an issue, and we keep hampering on it, and hampering on it, and hampering on it. We keep going at it. But what about the other issues? We don't seem to want to solve problems before they happen. We seem to problems to solve them as they happen or after they happen. Also, the thing that bothered me the most, and I'm not necessarily trying to knock Trump, because I think it's an issue that hits all presidents, is that they say that there's widespread fraud in our government, but they never prove it. If you're going to say that there's fraud anywhere in the election process, in voting, prove it. Show me. It's one thing to get people riled up. It's one thing to get people angry. It's one thing to get people upset. But why? Have a solution, or at least something to work towards solving it. No political party should transform itself into an abolitionist, or excuse me, into a authoritarian cult, and they do that in many cases. The political parties, in many cases, become more important than the candidate running, and I don't like that at all. I think, why can't I vote for a Republican if I think the guy's good? McCain's a good example. I wish McCain was running now. In many cases, I liked him. Now, I didn't like him more than the man that beat him. Okay, and I voted for Obama, but I did like John McCain, and I had a lot of respect for him.
Well, I agree with all three of you in many ways. Ron, I've got one question about the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's difficult to know what to believe because everybody's got an issue.
Yeah.
But when I think about Israel, I think about the only nation in the Mideast that has a democratic form of government. In fact, Arabs from what was known as Palestine there are some of them that are in the Knesset. They're elected officials in the Israeli government.
Exactly.
Which would be astounding to a lot of people to know that there are Palestinian Arabs in the Israeli Knesset. The two-state solution, there was one that was turned down by the Palestinians. You were right in saying that neither country is without fault.
Right.
And in the United States, we have been back and forth on our support for Israel. We were either the second or the first nation in the United Nations to approve partition. And we supported Israel for the longest time. And gradually, over time, that support shifted away from Israel and in favor of the Palestinians. I don't quite know why, but that is a very, very messy, complicated situation. over
Extremely
there.
so. I mean, I read about the humanitarian effects here, which go on when school children are detained and so on and so forth. It's a huge problem. It's huge for a lot of places in the world, particularly there. And Joe, it seems to me too, thinking about the whole business of representative government, and it comes to mind recently in connection with Joe Manchin, for example, as a good example here. We think, well, okay, we elect somebody and he's going to go to Congress and he's going to do our bidding. He's going to follow what we want. Well, Joe Manchin represents a coal country. He has a lot of financial support from the wealthier portions of that country, which aren't very many in West Virginia, but the major coal companies are behind him. He represents them. He's a Democrat in a strong Republican environment. Is he right or wrong in standing up for those interests? Because when you look at it and you see that again, he's wealthy. He lives when he's in Washington. He has a houseboat on the Potomac. I understand. It's not necessarily that nice, but it's certainly something that most people don't have. And he drives a fancy car and so on and so forth. And he's probably not without fault, but is he or is he not? This is, I think, a problem with what do we expect from our representatives? Do we want them to be their own people? Should we elect them for their basic beliefs and their basic character, and or to just have them be our puppets? And that's hard to do because we're diverse.
But do we believe that's really their basic beliefs?
Yeah.
Or they're just doing it just to get us to vote for them?
Yeah.
When we talk about representation, I think we have to look at the Electoral College and the way in which we elect our presidents. I know this is a big concern to me. There are many states in the United States where one Electoral College vote may represent 1,000 people, but in California, it represents 10 times as many. So it actually diminishes the value of the voter in our larger states. And while this might have been a good idea when our founding fathers established it, I'm not sure that it is right today. And perhaps we should look at doing simply a popular vote for the President of the United States. We use a popular vote for every other election. And I'm not sure why we are still doing that on a national level.
That's so that New York and California don't control the whole country.
Well, I don't think that that's what's happening right now. We're allowing the jerks in Wyoming to control the entire country. So, I mean, I guess it depends on which way you look at it. But you can have right-leaning people in any state, and that this way they would feel like their vote counts. If presently you are a Republican in California, you don't feel like your vote counts. If you're a Democrat in North Dakota, you don't think your vote counts. So this way, everybody's would count, no matter which state they happen to live in.
That argument about California and New York for me doesn't hold water. Both those states are diverse in their political people. If each of them has a vote, what's unfair about that?
You'd have to ask Benjamin Franklin, I suppose. But that was the purpose of the Electoral College in the first place, was to keep the highly populated states from controlling government. I mean, Montana, what kind of a chance would they have? But in any event, those are all, very, very good points. I would like to know, Patty, what kind of a possible solution is there when the United States Congress controls elections? and what can they, I mean, they have had so many bills go through Congress that come out so watered down that it's business as usual when all the rhetoric is spewed out about fairness and lack of wealth and the election process. It all turns out the same. How many
Yeah,
times
and
have we
I
solved
agree.
this problem?
I mean,
Pardon me?
unfortunately, I'm not sure they're going to come up with a solution because of what you just said. They are at least looking at some of the aspects of the Electoral College now in terms of the defining and explaining the duties of the vice president when they count the electoral votes. That's a minor thing. That's something we never thought we'd have to do. But due to the last election, we realized maybe we do need to define that. So maybe baby steps before we get to the big thing. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, we could talk about lifetime appointments on the Supreme Court. We could talk about gun control. We can talk about presidential pardons, all of these things. And all we're going to be able to do is to take baby steps. But we first have to recognize that there is a problem before anything is going to be done.
Okay, very, very quickly, and everybody chime in on this. Is democracy threatened,
Yes.
Yes.
Patty?
Yes.
So we have a problem with that. Well, thank you very much, folks, and we will see you all on Wednesday, the what,
23rd.
23rd.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.